The boutique smelled of money and silence, the kind of silence that exists only in places where a single glance at a price tag could break a working man's spirit. Adam Wright stood motionless among the ivory gowns, his tattooed hands folded behind his back, watching his fiancée admire herself in a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. Outside, rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows. And through that glass, beyond the world of silk and champagne, he saw her. Eva Bolton. On her knees. Begging. Pregnant. For 3 seconds, Adam forgot how to breathe. Adam Wright had built an empire on certainty. He knew which men to trust, which judges to buy, and which enemies to bury before they became problems. He knew that Maya Doyle, brilliant, calculating, untouchable, was the perfect match for a man who needed power more than passion. Their wedding wasn't about love. It was a merger. A crown worn by two people who understood that sentiment was a luxury neither could afford. But certainty shattered the moment he looked through the rain-soaked glass. Eva. The name alone carved through 3 years of carefully constructed distance. She was supposed to be gone, living her new life somewhere far from him, far from the danger that came with his name. That's what the letters had said. That's what his people had confirmed. She'd chosen to walk away, and he'd let her, because that's what you did when you loved someone in his world, you let them survive. Except she wasn't surviving. She was kneeling on the wet pavement outside a cafe, her hand outstretched, her clothes soaked through. And beneath the oversized jacket, her body told a story Adam couldn't ignore, swollen with a pregnancy she shouldn't have been facing alone. Maya's voice floated from the dressing platform, something about lace or beading or whatever brides obsessed over. Adam didn't hear her. He was already moving toward the door, his pulse pounding in his ears, his mind racing through a single, devastating equation: the timeline, the silence, the lies. Someone had made Eva disappear. And the woman smiling in the wedding gown behind him suddenly looked far too pleased with herself. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now let's get into story. Adam didn't remember pushing through the boutique door. One moment he was standing among the gowns, the next he was outside, rain soaking through his suit as he scanned the crowded sidewalk. Eva was already moving away, limping slightly, clutching her jacket closed against the cold. She looked smaller than he remembered, like the world had been grinding her down piece by piece. Eva! His voice cut through the noise of traffic and distant sirens. She froze, her shoulders hunching forward in a way that made his chest tighten. When she turned, her face was pale, eyes wide with something that looked dangerously close to fear. Of him. Don't. Her voice was barely audible over the rain. Please just don't. Adam closed the distance between them in 4 strides, his hand reaching for her arm before he caught himself. Up close, she looked worse than he thought. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, her cheekbones too sharp, her lips cracked. And the pregnancy, God, she had to be 6, maybe 7 months along. The timeline screamed at him, demanding answers he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. What the hell happened to you? The words came out harder than he intended, but he couldn't soften them. 3 years. 3 years she'd been gone, and this is what she'd become? Eva's laugh was bitter, broken. You know what happened, Adam. You made it very clear what would happen if I stayed. What are you talking about? The letters. The men at my apartment. Her voice cracked, and she wrapped her arms around herself, around the swell of her stomach. You told me to disappear or you'd make sure I disappeared permanently. So I did. I ran, and I kept running, and now... She looked down at her belly, her expression somewhere between devastation and defiance. Now it doesn't matter anymore. Adam's mind raced, cataloging every word, every impossible accusation. Letters. Men. Threats. He'd sent none of it. He'd woken up one morning to find her gone, her apartment empty except for a single note that said she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't live in his shadow, couldn't be what he needed. He'd believed it because he'd always known, deep down, that she deserved better. Eva, I never. Mr. Wright. Maya's voice sliced through the rain, sharp and impatient. She stood in the boutique doorway, still in her wedding gown, looking like some vengeful goddess of silk and fury. What on earth are you doing? We have the final fitting to complete. Eva's face drained of what little color it had. She took a step back, then another, shaking her head. I can't do this. I'm sorry. You're not going anywhere. Adam moved to block her path, his voice dropping to something quieter, more dangerous. Not until you tell me who sent those men. Not until you tell me. His eyes dropped to her stomach again. Not until you tell me everything. Eva's apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where Adam's men wouldn't venture without backup. The stairwell reeked of mold and something acrid he didn't want to identify. She tried to lose him in the crowd, but Adam had built a career on hunting people who didn't want to be found. When she finally stopped running, it was only because her body gave out, one hand braced against the graffitied wall, the other pressed to her lower back. He'd called for his car. She'd refused to get in. So he'd followed her here, 3 steps behind, watching her climb those stairs like each one might be her last. The apartment itself was worse than he'd imagined. A single room with a hot plate on a card table, a mattress on the floor, and a window that didn't quite close. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like malignant flowers. This was where she'd been living. Where she'd been carrying his child. You shouldn't be here. Eva stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped protectively around herself. If they see you. If who sees me? Adam closed the door behind him, his voice dangerously quiet. Who's been threatening you, Eva? Your people. The ones you sent? I didn't send anyone. They had pictures of us. Her composure cracked, and suddenly she was shouting, tears streaming down her face. They knew things only you would know. They said you decided I was a liability, that you couldn't trust me not to talk, and that if I valued my life, I'd disappear and never contact you again. Adam felt something cold settle in his gut. When? 3 years ago. August. She sank onto the edge of the mattress, exhausted. 2 men. They came to my apartment, our apartment, while you were in Chicago. They showed me photos of women who'd gotten too close to your business. Women who'd ended up in pieces. I was in Chicago for the Castellano merger. Adam's mind was already working, cataloging who'd known his schedule, who'd had access to his files. I was gone for 4 days. They gave me a letter. Said it was from you? Eva reached under the mattress and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft from handling. I kept it. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I died, someone would find it and know why. Adam took the letter, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. The handwriting was a perfect forgery of his own. He'd seen enough of Maya's meticulous work to recognize her touch. The words were clinical, brutal, exactly what he'd say if he actually wanted someone gone. It even had his signature, complete with the slight hook on the W he'd developed after breaking his hand 2 years prior. This isn't from me. I know that now. Eva's voice was hollow. You wouldn't be here if you'd wanted me dead. You would have just finished the job. Eva refused the car again, but this time Adam didn't give her a choice. He'd made a single phone call, and 20 minutes later 3 SUVs pulled up to the curb. His men knew better than to ask questions when he emerged from that building carrying a pregnant woman who looked like she might shatter at any moment. The drive to his estate took 40 minutes. Eva spent 38 of them staring out the window in silence, her hand resting on her stomach in a gesture so unconsciously protective it made Adam's throat tight. When the gates finally came into view, wrought iron and 12 feet high, She turned to look at him for the first time since they'd left her apartment. This is a mistake. The mistake was letting you go in the first place. Adam kept his voice level, but his hands were clenched in his lap. You're staying here. You and… He couldn't quite finish the sentence. The reality of it was still too enormous, too impossible. Your son. Eva's voice was barely a whisper. It's a boy. Adam's world tilted sideways. The house was exactly as Eva remembered it. Too big, too cold, every surface polished to a mirror shine. Maya was waiting in the foyer, still wearing the red dress from the boutique, her arms crossed and her expression carved from ice. She'd beaten them home, probably broke every traffic law doing it, and now she stood like a queen surveying an intruder in her castle. You cannot be serious. Maya's voice could have cut glass. Adam, tell me you did not bring that woman into our home. My home. Adam's correction was quiet, lethal. And Eva's staying. Maya's eyes flicked to Eva's stomach, and something dark and ugly flickered across her perfect features before she locked it down. She's homeless. Probably mentally unstable. You can't possibly believe. I believe she was driven out by someone who forged my handwriting and threatened her life. Adam stepped between them, his body a barrier. I believe she's been surviving on scraps for 3 years while carrying my child. And I believe that whoever did this to her is going to wish they'd never been born. The silence that followed was absolute. Maya's composure didn't crack so much as splinter, tiny fissures appearing in that flawless facade. Her hand trembled slightly before she steadied it, her manicured nails digging into her palm. You're making a terrible mistake. Maya's voice was still controlled, but there was something new underneath it now. Something that sounded like panic. That child could be anyone's. She's obviously been. Careful. Adam's voice dropped to a register that made his men step back instinctively. Very, very careful how you finish that sentence. Maya's jaw clenched. She looked at Eva once more, a gaze full of cold calculation and barely concealed hatred, then turned on her heel and walked toward the stairs. We'll discuss this when you've come to your senses. But Adam was already done discussing anything. Adam's private investigator was a man named Chin who'd spent 20 years with the FBI before deciding government salaries weren't worth the aggravation. He operated out of a nondescript office in Chinatown and specialized in finding things people desperately wanted to stay buried. Adam had used him 3 times before, always for situations that required discretion and absolute loyalty. This time, he wanted blood. Chin called at 2 in the morning, 4 days after Eva had moved into the guest wing. Adam took the call in his study, door locked, a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched sitting on the desk beside him. You're not going to like this. Chen's voice was rough from too many cigarettes, and not enough sleep. Tell me anyway. Maya Doyle made 6 payments over a 3-year period to an account registered to Victor Reyes. You remember Reyes? Adam remembered. Reyes had been one of his enforcers, good with forgeries and better at intimidation. He'd left the organization 2 months after Eva disappeared, citing personal reasons. Adam had let him go without question. Another mistake in a growing list. How much? 200,000 total. First payment was 3 years ago, mid-August. Same week your girl vanished. Chin paused, and Adam heard papers shuffling. Reyes used the money to relocate to Arizona. New identity, clean record. He's running a bar in Scottsdale now, pretending he never broke a bone in his life. What did Maya pay him for? I pulled his phone records from that month. 3 calls to Maya's personal cell in the week before Eva Bolton left town. Then nothing. Radio silence. More shuffling. But here's where it gets interesting. I found the original files. Adam's hand tightened on the phone. What files? The letters. The photos. Everything Reyes showed Eva to convince her you wanted her dead. Chen's voice hardened. Maya provided all of it. The stationery came from a print shop she uses for campaign materials. The handwriting samples were lifted from documents you'd signed. I traced them back to contracts Maya had access to during the Castellano negotiations. She even gave Reyes your schedule so he'd know when to make contact. The room felt suddenly airless. Adam stood, pacing to the window, looking out at the manicured grounds where Eva was sleeping 3 floors above him. Safe. Finally safe. While the woman who'd orchestrated her exile was sleeping just down the hall. There's more. Chen's tone shifted, becoming almost apologetic. Maya didn't just threaten Eva. She had Reyes plant evidence with your accountant suggesting Eva was skimming from your businesses. She was building a case to make you believe Eva had betrayed you, so when she disappeared, you'd assume it was guilt. Did the accountant take the bait? He flagged it, but then Eva was already gone, so he dropped it. Figured it didn't matter anymore. Chen exhaled slowly. Boss, this wasn't just about getting rid of a rival. This was about rewriting history. Maya wanted to make sure that even if Eva ever came back, you'd never believe her. Adam's reflection stared back at him from the darkened window, and he barely recognized the man looking back. The social workers arrived at noon on a Tuesday, flanked by 2 police officers and carrying clipboards that might as well have been weapons. Adam was in a meeting with his lawyers when his head of security interrupted, his face tight with barely controlled anger. Sir, there are people here from Child Protective Services. They're demanding to see Ms. Bolton. Adam was on his feet before the man finished speaking. He found them in the foyer, a severe woman in her 50s and a younger man who looked fresh out of graduate school, both wearing expressions of professional concern that didn't quite mask their discomfort at being in his home. Mr. Wright. The woman extended her hand with crisp efficiency. I'm Janet Michaels from CPS. We received a report of concern regarding a pregnant woman residing at this address. We need to conduct a welfare assessment. A report from whom? That information is confidential. Her smile was thin, practiced. But we take all reports seriously, especially those involving vulnerable expectant mothers. Adam heard the careful phrasing, the implication threaded through every word. Vulnerable. Expectant. As if Eva were some helpless victim he'd imprisoned rather than the woman he was protecting. Ms. Bolton is a guest in my home. She's receiving excellent prenatal care and we'll need to verify that ourselves. The younger man spoke up, his voice pitched with the righteousness of someone who believed he was saving lives. The report indicates Ms. Bolton may be experiencing coercion, may lack stable housing history, and may be at risk of postpartum psychosis given her documented mental health struggles. Ice flooded Adam's veins. Documented by whom? But he already knew. Maya's father sat on the board of 3 major hospitals. She'd have had no trouble manufacturing a psychiatric history, planting records that would make Eva look unstable, dangerous to herself and her unborn child. Eva appeared at the top of the stairs, her hand gripping the banister, her face pale. She'd heard everything. Adam watched her eyes go to the social workers, then to the police, and saw the exact moment she understood what was happening. They're going to take the baby. Her voice was hollow, distant. That's what this is. They're going to say I'm unfit and take him before he's even born. No one's taking anyone. Adam's voice cut through the foyer like a blade, but Janet Michaels was already moving forward, her expression shifting into something falsely sympathetic. Ms. Bolton, we just want to talk. To make sure you and your baby are safe. If you could come with us too. She's not going anywhere without her lawyer present. Adam positioned himself between Eva and the social workers. And unless you have a court order, you're leaving my property. Now. Janet's expression hardened. Mr. Wright, obstructing a child welfare investigation is a serious offense. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to pursue emergency custody measures. Behind them, Maya stood in the doorway to the drawing room, watching with the faintest smile playing at her lips. The meeting took place in a warehouse that smelled of rust and old blood, the kind of place where Adam had conducted business for 2 decades. Marcus Volkov sat across from him at a steel table, looking older than Adam remembered but no less dangerous. They'd been at war 3 years ago over shipping routes. Adam had won. Volkov had lost half his territory and most of his pride. Now Adam was here to give it all back. You must be desperate. Volkov's accent was thick, his smile showing too many gold teeth. The great Adam Wright, coming to me with his hat in his hand. I'm not here for charity. Adam slid a folder across the table. I'm here to make a deal. Volkov opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents inside. Deeds, contracts, territory maps. Everything he'd lost and more. His fingers trembled slightly as he touched the papers, as if afraid they might disappear. What's the catch? Maya Doyle's father. Adam kept his voice level, businesslike. Senator Richard Doyle. I know he's been laundering money through your casinos for the past 5 years. I know you have recordings of every conversation, every transaction, because you're smart enough not to trust politicians. Volkov's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation? Interest? Why do you want them? That's not your concern. It is as if I'm giving up leverage that's kept federal prosecutors off my back for half a decade. Volkov leaned back in his chair, studying Adam with the intensity of a predator sizing up prey. You're at war with the daughter. This is about the woman I've been hearing whispers about. The pregnant one you brought home. Adam said nothing. In this world, silence was often the most honest answer. Volkov laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. You're burning your empire down for a woman. I never thought I'd see the day. He tapped the folder with one thick finger. But I like it. Shows you're human after all, right? Makes you sloppy, but human. Do we have a deal or not? The recordings for the territories. All of them. Volkov stood, extending his hand. And one more thing. When this is over, when you've destroyed the Doyles and their little political kingdom, you owe me a favor. No questions, no negotiations. You owe me. Adam knew what he was agreeing to. A blank check to a man who'd once promised to kill him slowly. But Eva was upstairs in his house, terrified that the state would take their son. Maya was circling like a shark, using laws and bureaucracy as weapons he couldn't fight with bullets and intimidation. He needed something that would bring her entire family down. He shook Volkov's hand. Deal. 2 hours later, Adams sat in his study with 12 hours of audio recordings, listening to Senator Richard Doyle discuss bribes, blackmail, and the trafficking routes his daughter had helped him establish through her charity foundation. Every word was a nail in their coffin. Every word was justice Eva deserved. Adam called Maya into his study 3 days after the CPS visit. She entered with the cautious confidence of someone who thought they were winning, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood like a countdown. You wanted to see me? The wedding. Adam kept his voice neutral, tired even. We need to move forward with it. Maya's eyebrows rose a fraction. I thought, given recent circumstances. Eva understands her place now. She's agreed to stay quiet, to raise the child away from the press. The lies came easily, smoothly, the way they always had in negotiations. But your father's right. We can't afford to look weak, not with the Castellano merger still pending. A cancelled wedding raises too many questions. He watched Maya process this, saw the moment she decided to believe him because it aligned with what she wanted. Her shoulders relaxed infinitesimally, and that predatory smile crept back onto her face. I'm glad you've come to your senses. She moved closer, her hand resting on his desk. Eva can stay in the guest house after the wedding if you insist on maintaining contact with the child. Discreetly, of course. Adam nodded, letting her think she'd won. Of course. That night, while Maya was at a campaign fundraiser for her father, Adam moved Eva. Not to the guest house. Not to any property connected to his name or his businesses. He'd bought a cottage 6 months ago under a shell corporation even she didn't know about, 40 miles outside the city, surrounded by woods and accessible only by a single dirt road. Eva packed the few belongings she'd accumulated in silence. She'd been quiet since the social workers came, moving through the house like a ghost, one hand always pressed to her stomach as if she could shield her son through Will alone. "You don't have to do this," she spoke as Adam loaded her bag into an unmarked sedan. "You could just let us go. Start over with Maya like you planned." "That was never the plan." Adam opened the passenger door for her. "The plan was control. Power. Building something that couldn't be taken from me." He paused, looking at her in the dim light of the garage. "But I was wrong about what that something was." The cottage had been stocked with everything she'd need. Food, medical supplies, a phone connected to a secure line that only Adam had the number to. He'd stationed 2 of his most trusted men in a cabin a quarter-mile down the road, close enough to respond to any threat but far enough to give Eva privacy. "How long?" Eva stood in the doorway, looking small and lost in the oversized sweater she wore. 2 weeks. Just until the wedding." Adam didn't tell her what he planned to do at that wedding. Didn't tell her that he was about to burn down everything he built for a chance at something real. "And then? Then we disappear. You, me, and our son." He said it like a vow, and maybe it was. "Somewhere Maya and her father can never reach us." The cathedral was everything Maya had dreamed of. White roses cascaded from every surface, candles flickered in crystal holders, and 600 guests filled the pews, senators, judges, business moguls, and crime lords all seated side by side in an unholy congregation. The press lined the back walls, cameras ready to capture the union of political dynasty and underworld power. Adam stood at the altar in a custom suit, watching Maya glide down the aisle on her father's arm. She was radiant, triumphant, every inch the woman who'd orchestrated the perfect life by destroying anyone who stood in her way. Senator Doyle beamed with paternal pride, oblivious to the federal agents Chen had confirmed were waiting 3 blocks away. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. Vows were recited, rings exchanged, and then the officiant smiled warmly at the crowd. "Before we conclude, the groom has prepared a tribute to his bride." Maya's eyes flickered with surprise, then pleasure. Adam had told her there would be no video, no sentimentality. But she recovered quickly, turning to face the massive screen that descended behind the altar, probably expecting a montage of their courtship, their power, their perfect future. The screen lit up with a date stamp, 3 years ago, August 15th. Security footage showed 2 men entering Eva's apartment building. The audio kicked in, Reyes's voice, cold and professional, telling Eva that Adam had ordered her elimination. The camera angle shifted to show Eva's face, the exact moment her world shattered. Gasps rippled through the cathedral. Maya's hand tightened on her bouquet, knuckles white. The footage continued. Bank transfers from Maya's personal accounts to Reyes. Text messages coordinating the timing, the threats, the forged letters. Then newer footage. Maya on the phone with CPS, her voice dripping with false concern as she reported a mentally unstable woman being held against her will. "Turn it off." Maya's voice was barely audible, but Adam heard the panic threading through it. The screen shifted to audio recordings. Senator Doyle's voice filled the cathedral, discussing bribes and trafficking routes with clinical detachment. Names were named. Amounts specified. Crimes detailed with the carelessness of men who believed themselves untouchable. "Adam, stop this. Stop this right now." Maya grabbed his arm, her perfect composure disintegrating. "You're destroying everything." "I'm destroying you." Adam's voice carried across the suddenly silent cathedral. "The way you tried to destroy Eva. The way you tried to take my son." The cathedral doors burst open. Federal agents flooded in, badges raised, shouting commands that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Senator Doyle was on his feet, face purple with rage, but two agents were already moving toward him. Maya stumbled backward, her wedding dress tangling around her legs, her eyes wild with something that looked almost like disbelief. "You can't do this," she hissed at Adam. "You're one of us. They'll take you down too." "I know." Adam removed his ring, letting it fall to the marble floor with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. "I'm counting on it." The cottage looked different in spring. Wildflowers had overtaken the edges of the property, and the trees that had been bare and skeletal when Adam first brought Eva here were now thick with green. He stood on the porch, a mug of coffee cooling in his hand, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Inside, he could hear Eva singing softly to their son. The federal investigation had taken 4 months. Adam had cooperated with everything, trading information on his operations for immunity on specific charges. He'd still spent 6 weeks in custody, watching his empire dismantle itself from a cell that was marginally more comfortable than the ones he'd sent other men to. Maya and her father were facing decades behind bars. The syndicate had fractured without his leadership, smaller operations absorbing the pieces like scavengers on a carcass. He'd lost everything he'd spent 20 years building. And he never felt lighter. The door creaked open behind him. Eva emerged with their son, James, named after her father, bundled against her chest. She'd gained weight in the past months, color returning to her cheeks, the haunted look fading from her eyes. She still startled at unexpected sounds, still checked the locks twice before bed, but she smiled now. Real smiles that reached her eyes. "He's finally asleep." She leaned against Adam's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, careful not to disturb the baby. "I give it 20 minutes before he's awake again. 20 minutes of peace. I'll take it." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher. A deer emerged from the tree line, paused to study them with liquid eyes, then disappeared back into the woods. This far from the city, the only sounds were birdsong and wind through leaves. "Do you miss it?" Eva asked quietly. "The power, the control, all of it?" Adam considered the question, really considered it. 6 months ago, he would have said his empire was everything, that without it he was nothing. But that was before he'd held his son for the first time, before he'd watched Eva sleep without nightmares, before he'd learned what it meant to live without constantly looking over his shoulder. "No." The answer came easier than he expected. "I don't." "Liar." But Eva was smiling. "You miss it a little. The strategy, the negotiations. You were good at it. I was good at a lot of things that were bad for me." Adam pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm learning to be good at this instead." James stirred, making the small squeaking sounds that preceded a full-blown cry. Eva laughed softly and headed back inside, leaving Adam alone on the porch. He thought about the cathedral, about Maya's face as the agents led her away, about the empire he'd burned to ash. Then he thought about the woman inside singing to their son, about the life they were building from nothing, about being someone his child wouldn't have to fear. The choice had never really been a choice at all. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.